let me introduce our next speaker, GLENNA. She has been an accessibility advocate since 2001. She has over 20 years experience with presentations, data visualizations, demos, prototypes, and system UI. Today, you are learning with her what accessibility is, why it matters, and how you can ensure your content is accessible to the broadest audience possible. Please enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Glenna Shaw. I'm currently a full-time grandma, having retired from a 36-year career with the U.S. federal government in 2018. While I don't participate as much in data analysis these days, one area that I remain committed to supporting and advocating is accessibility and inclusivity, and that's what we're here for in this session. First, I'm going to talk about understanding accessibility and why it matters, what we really mean by accessible content, why you should care, and how it impacts you. Accessibility, as the name implies, is about the ease of access. For content to be accessible, it should be easy to get, easy to use, and easy to understand by everyone. These characteristics are reflected in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Content should be robust, meaning easy to get no matter what type of technology or device you're using. Content should be operable, meaning the interface and navigation should be easy to use. And content should be perceivable and understandable, meaning the interface and content must be easy to understand. There are 6 domains of functioning for every human being. How well can you see? How well can you hear? How good is your comprehension? How well can you move? How well can you communicate? And how well can you take care of yourself? In a study on the functional limitation among adults aged 18 and over in the United States from 2010 through 2018, the National Center for Health Statistics found that approximately 25 to 30% of adults under 65 experience some level of difficulty in at least one domain of functioning. After age 65, those numbers are nearly reversed, with 60 to 70% experiencing difficulty and only 30 to 40% experiencing no difficulties. This means even if you have no functional limitations now, you have about a 7 in 10 chance of having limitations when you get older. Accessibility is good for business. In the United States, 26% of the population identifies as having a disability. That's more than 61 million Americans. That population is estimated to have $500 billion in disposable income, which equates to $21 billion in discretionary income after paying for necessities. That's more money than any other minority group, including African American and Hispanic markets combined. Finally, 75% of Americans prefer brands that make an impact. Consumers love companies that support causes and make a difference. The curb cut effect, in its essence, asserts that an investment in one group can cascade out and up and be a substantial investment in the broader well-being of a nation, one whose policies and practices create an equitable economy, a healthy community of opportunity, and a just society. The term comes from the curb cuts on sidewalks that were originally made for wheelchair users, but also benefited people with strollers, walkers, or luggage. The origin of today's keyboard is a typewriter that was invented for a blind friend. Alexander Graham Bell's invention of the phone had its roots in his desire to help his deaf mother and wife. Voice recognition was originally designed for the blind and closed captions for the deaf. So when you're easily pulling your luggage across intersections, typing on your computer, giving voice commands to your phone, or enjoying a foreign film in a language you don't understand, you're benefiting from technology that was originally invented for someone with a disability. There are three crucial steps that must happen before content can be fully accessible. The vendor must design the application to include accessibility features. This includes features for a person to use the application, as well as the ability for a content creator to customize accessibility elements of the content. This step is the responsibility of the vendor. Microsoft has done an exceptional job in this area for the Microsoft Office products and a bit less stellar for the Power BI application. Number two, the content creator must customize the accessibility elements of the content using the application. This is the content creator's responsibility. Number three, the consumer must know how to use the accessibility features of the application, as well as how to use any custom assistive technology. This is the responsibility of the consumer. The vendor, content creator, and consumer each have a part to play in the end goal of accessible content. So let's talk about the basic elements of accessible content. While a picture may be worth 1,000 words, that old adage doesn't work so well if you have visual limitations. Alt text, also known as descriptive text, is designed to mitigate this limitation. Any visual objects, including pictures, charts, and interactive objects such as slicers, should have alt text applied to them. Be thoughtful in your descriptions. I find the easiest method is to pretend I'm describing the object to someone on the phone. You may have occasionally experienced having one chart on top of another on a spreadsheet. This is because objects in most applications are layered, usually with the first object you add being on the bottom and the last on the top. The reason the layering order matters is twofold. One, it affects the tab order, and two, it affects the order in which the objects are read by a screen reader. Opening the selection pane can show you the object order and allow you to make adjustments if needed. Objects are read and tabbed through from the bottom up. Color blindness affects around 300 million people in the world. The most common form of color blindness is red-green color blindness, which affects up to 1 in 12 males, that's about 8%, and 1 in 200 females, that's about 0.5%. The chart on the right demonstrates how inadequate color contrast can obscure the data for persons with visual color limitations. The easiest method to check color contrast in charts is to paste them into PowerPoint and view them in grayscale. Color should not be used as the only means to convey information. Size and labels can help clarify information in a chart. Tables are an accessibility boon and bust. While placing data in a tabular format makes it much easier to absorb visually, persons with visual limitations may struggle navigating the information. Tables should be given a name to help identify their content. Tables should be formatted with the Format Table feature or as a pivot table, not just visually formatted with colors and lines. This clearly identifies the content as a table to screen readers. Header row and first column should be checked in the table options to assist with navigation through the table. If you want to show totals for your table, select the Total Row option. Quick Styles can provide visual formatting that makes it easier to consume the information for sighted persons. Table options impact the visual formatting of Quick Styles. Text elements should be meaningful, accurate, easy to read, and easy to understand. Use plain words to describe hyperlinks and screen tips as opposed to a URL. Avoid acronyms unless you're sure they're meaningful to all your audience. Use fonts that are large enough to be read on all devices your consumer might use. Ensure text is not overlaying each other. Now let's discuss how to make your Excel spreadsheets accessible. Excel is inherently an accessibility tool. It takes linear data and presents it in a tabular format that is easier to understand and absorb. Imagine if the only way you could work with data was in a comma-delimited format. Microsoft has created a fabulous tool for all its Office products called the Accessibility Checker. Unless you deliberately disable it, the Accessibility Checker is continuously running as you're creating your content. In a lot, but not all instances, it will automatically notify you if your content is not accessible. There are two ways to open the accessibility pane, either using the Review Toolbar tab or selecting Accessibility in the status bar at the bottom of the screen. The accessibility pane will show you any items that need action. Select the drop-downs to be guided through actions to correct the accessibility issue. While the Accessibility Checker does a great job with a lot of things, it mainly focuses on alt text for charts. That's great for persons using a screen reader, but doesn't help much with making your charts accessible for your sighted consumers. Make your charts have meaningful and visible titles and labels. You also want to make sure you do not use color only to convey information. In this example, I've used labels to clearly identify which line belongs to which series. Other methods you can use are size and patterns. Now let's talk a little bit about how to make Power BI dashboards accessible. Unfortunately, Power BI doesn't have an accessibility checker, but Microsoft does have a very good online guide for how to make your dashboards accessible. If you search for Accessible Power BI using Bing, it should be the first link listed. Finally, a word of advice when it comes to designing accessibly. The famous John Lingate quote, as paraphrased by Abraham Lincoln, says, "You can please some of the people some of the time, all of the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you can never please all of the people all of the time." And this is true. No matter how hard you try, there is almost always going to be someone unsatisfied with your efforts. I once had someone who was upset with me because they said they could not distinguish the blue line from a purple line in one of my charts. At first, I felt very defensive because I'd made the effort to ensure there was significant contrast between the two lines. But then I realized how frustrating that must have been for the consumer. So my response was, "I'm sorry, tell me how I can do better next time." And they did just that. The important thing is not to take it personal if you fail to make your content accessible for someone. Instead, treat it as an opportunity to learn and grow. This concludes this session on accessibility and inclusivity. Please provide feedback on this presentation using the link or the QR code. Microsoft is seeking research participants. You can check it out using the link or QR code.
Hello, Glenna. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Glenna, it was amazing representation. We have 4 questions for you.
Would you rather I do the demo first or answer questions first?
Yeah, let's do the demo first, please.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my whole screen because I've got to flip back and forth through a few windows. So we will go ahead and go here. Now, can you all see the spreadsheet?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Okay, so you guys heard me talk about the accessibility checker and you heard me really brag it up, okay? So the reason why I bragged it up is because it is really, really stellar in PowerPoint and Word. In Excel, it's pretty good, but it does have some limitations, and I'm going to show you what those are. First of all, you heard Tim talk, if you attended Tim's session, you heard him talk earlier. He called it the table, the capital T table, which implies that there's a little t table. In my humble opinion, there is no such thing as a little t table. A little t table is a fake table from my perspective. And I'll show you what I mean by that right here. You can see we've got 2 tables on this spreadsheet, what looks like 2 tables. In truth, this table here is only formatted visually. If it didn't have the coloring there, it wouldn't be really a table. It would just be populated cells. This table here is in truth an actual table. And the reason why that matters is because someone who's visually impaired is dependent upon something like a screen reader in order to be able to understand what is on the screen because they can't see it. So when you're looking at a table presents things in a tabular format, as we all know. So what that means is you literally look from the first column to the column header to the first row item, and that matches what your value relates to. So in this example where I've clicked, the value of 68.2% goes with the year 2010 and no difficulty. When you have just a visually formatted table, someone using a screen reader is not going to be able to tell where that relationship. Whereas with a for real table, big T table, in other words, which is achieved by highlighting your cells and then selecting format as table, and it's going to give you a bunch of different layouts. The other thing that this allows you to do is under your table design, and I showed this in the presentation, you want to check the header row and the first column. Not only will that format, it'll apply formatting to it, and you can see here if we do a drop down on table styles, we could apply this format to get the first row since we've selected first row. But what else it will do is if we select this value of 35, if someone's using a screen reader, they just have to hit a button to get this reference of the header and the first column to find out within the table the relationship of the value of that cell. So that's why the big T tables are extremely important. And I will tell you that the accessibility checker does not check any of your little T tables, your visually formatted tables, and tell you to turn them into big T tables so that someone with a screen reader can read them. One other item I want to show you on tables is rather than doing a manual total row, if you're using a big T table, you can just select total row and it will put these values in for you. This one, you see this drop down, what we want actually is an average, but you can do that on every single cell in the total row automatically without you having to calculate that by hand or in your head or any other way or with a formula. In addition to that, the screen reader is also going to tell the consumer who's using a screen reader that these values are a total. So that's a little bit about the accessibility of simple tables, and that's what these are. These are simple just header row, first column, and value tables. Now, if we actually run the accessibility checker, and there's two ways to do that. You can click on review and click down the drop down that says check accessibility, and you have these options here, and you can see that's why your format as table is in your accessibility option. This lets you set accessibility options in the backstage of Excel. All of these accessibility options come enabled by default, but if for some reason you actually want to turn them off, here's where you do that. The other one, the big thing that Excel looks for is alt text. The easiest way actually though for you to open up the accessibility checker is down here in the status bar, and it's telling me investigate. And the reason it's telling me investigate is because I've put these images in here. This is an image that's within a cell because you have that option now. You can see we can toggle that in or out of a cell. This is the same image on top of the cells. This is an icon. Icons you generally don't need to worry about adding alt text to. If you select your icons doing the insert illustrations, if you select icons, they've already got the alt text written for you, so that's not something you typically need to worry about. And then this is a shape with text in it, so you're going to need to write alt text for that as well. If we select this investigate, it's going to bring up the accessibility pane. And you can see here's what our accessibility pane is telling us to check. First of all, it's telling us to check F3, that is this right here. If we do the drop down and we say add a description, it's going to expect us to enter a description for this image. We're just going to say EVG 2023 logo. And that takes care of that one. See how it just disappeared? Okay, should have disappeared. If we go to the next one, this is looking for a chart. Oh, I see. This is my next picture. No, that's the same one. It should be here. This is anytime you add a picture into Excel and lay it on top of the cells, it's going to, the AI engine is going to automatically generate a description for it. And we're going to go ahead and leave this description for this one. The reason why it generates it for this is because it's on top of the cell. So it recognizes it as a picture as opposed to this one, which it thinks is content in the cell. Then, as I told you before, the icon already has the alt text written for it, sorry. And the shape, as you can see here, I've written in the text. You want to describe this because even though it's possible for someone with a screen reader to read the text that's inside of shapes, the reason it takes extra effort for them to do that. So if you add alt text to it, you're being more accommodating to your consumers. Not sure why that one's still coming up. I think this is a bug that I'm going to have to report. Let's see if I mark it as decorative, if that'll take it away. Nope, still wants it. Anyway, you can see here that it's also telling me that the charts that I have in here need a descriptive text. And the other thing that it actually recognizes, this chart, it wants a description for this chart and just the timeline slicer, which I find interesting because it's not asking for a description for the selection slicers. So you can see that's a limitation of the inspection right there. Each of these, this should get an alt text the same as, you know, this one you can say age slicer. We'll go to this one, whoops. Say gender slicer. And then this one is a timeline slicer. Now, a quick word about the timeline slicer. One thing that I want everybody to know with the timeline slicer, a timeline slicer will never, ever be fully accessible. And the reason why is because the timeline slicer, you cannot use a keyboard to make changes to it. The only way you can use it is using a mouse. So therefore it has anyone who has mobility problems and can't use a mouse or a touch screen, the timeline slicer is not going to work for them. So just, you know, That's not to say you should never use timeline slicers, but if your folks, if you do have some folks with mobility issues, just be aware they're not going to be able to use that filter for your chart or your pivot table, whichever you're using it for. So if we go back to our tables, these are all alt text. These are considered errors under the accessibility engine. Now we've got a warning here. And what the warning is telling us is that this is hard to read text contrast. So if you look here, if I uncheck it, it's really easy to tell where the hard to read text is. And it's right here, this row. This is pretty difficult to read, even for me or anyone. So the easy thing to do is just to change the font color to a dark color. It's still going to flag this. You're not going to get rid of it because it wants you to change your pivot table style. Not sure. We'll try this one. Didn't make it go away. So we'll just do a quick undo there. I think that's not as attractive. And then it wants me to view the auto-generated description for this here. And that's all that my accessibility checker has flagged. However, having said that, if we go to the chart, one of the things that I told you all about is the overlaying of things. You can see here, this chart is literally sitting on top of the other chart. So neither of these charts have alt text. So not only are they not accessible to anyone with a screen reader, but they're also not accessible to someone who's sighted and looking at them because they're laying on top of each other. So here's where the selection pane comes in handy. You can, I think it's here. Yeah. Open up the selection pane and you can see chart 1 is the first chart I added. It's always going to be at the back. The one on the bottom is always going to be at the back, and it will be the first item that's read by a screen reader. Chart 2 is the one that's on top. And if you're working on a spreadsheet, one of the handy things that you can do with the selection pane, you can move items up and down, you know, forward and back, but you can also hide things that are on the spreadsheet if you want to, which is another nice feature. But we'll just move this here, and they were in the correct order that we wanted them because we wanted this chart read first, then this chart read next. Now a quick look at conditional formatting. Much as everybody likes the stoplight colors, a lot of people are red-green colorblind. So a quick way to check this, if you're running Windows, I don't know about any others, but if you are running Windows, in the settings, you can go to the color filters. It's under ease of access. It's for all the accessibility things. If you go to the color filters, you can turn them on or off, and you can actually toggle them on or off. So I've set that for grayscale because that's the easiest way to tell if you've got sufficient contrast between your colors for someone who's colorblind to be able to see them. And if in Windows, if we hit Control Window C, you can see it changed the screen to grayscale. And in this example, the colors that we have are fine because the contrast is sufficient, even though we're using red, yellow, and green, and we're using red and green on the same screen. They're still going to work because you can still see the information. Now with a chart, we can do the same thing, with Control Windows C. And what you can see here is, yeah, there's some contrast, but pretty much all these lines look almost the same color of gray, which means there's not sufficient contrast, and it would be hard. It's hard for me looking at it right now to tell the difference on this. The easy way to fix this, if I go back, first of all, to test it is, let me open up my PowerPoint here. I've got a blank slide in PowerPoint. If you don't have windows where you can toggle back and forth between grayscale, what you can do is copy your chart and paste it onto a blank slide in PowerPoint. Oh, well, it gave me both. That's okay. And what you want to do here in PowerPoint, you have the ability to view in grayscale. So if we turn it in grayscale, we can tell, yeah, this doesn't work. And if you have chosen the same theme for your spreadsheet, to do that, you're going to do, it's under page layout, and you can choose a theme. I'm using the Excel Virtually Global theme for both. You want to use the same theme for both your spreadsheet and your PowerPoint, which is here under design. Make sure you're using the same theme for both, because what that will enable you to do is go to chart design and then select change colors, and you can toggle through the different color sets for the charts to see if any of them are going to make a difference while it's still in grayscale. So you can see that none of the color sets made a difference here. So we need to do something else. And this is where I was telling folks, this is where I told you in the presentation that you should never use color as the only method of conveying information. So an easy way to fix this, since it's a line series. Okay, it's not, oh. Since it's a line series, is to select your first line, and that will show, it highlights all your points. If you select again for the last point on the line, and then right click, you can say add data label, and it will add it for just this single data point. Then you can select that data point, click on it twice until it gets this outline with the big white circles. Then you can right click on it and format that data point. And what you want to do, okay, oh, not the data point, sorry. You want to format that data label, and you want to select the series name for it. Then take away, you can remove your legend, and what you will have is a direct labeling for your series. So if we do the same thing here, if you don't get those white cells, it's going to give you a data, it's going to do all of the data labels. It won't do just the one, and then your chart starts to look cluttered and it's hard to read. But this is an easy way to take care of that differentiation. And honestly, this is just a better way to label your series than a legend anyway. A quick word about merge cells. Remember what I was telling you about the table headers and stuff? When you have a merge cell like this, basically you've got two rows that are acting as a header, and those are not going to be recognized in a big T table. So they're going to cause a problem if you're trying to let someone with a screen reader access it. The easy way you can take care of this is just to format this part as a table. Okay, we want first column. I don't need banded rows. Okay, we want to change these to white. because we don't have sufficient contrast. Whoop, missed one. Because we don't have sufficient contrast on this. Oh, it's going to give it these funny names. I forgot about that. Take off the filter button. What you can do here now is say, you can do no difficulty male. Oops. And then you can repeat that all the way across. So it's no difficulty male, no difficulty female, some difficulty male, some difficulty female, and you can repeat that all the way across. Now, let me just quickly expand these. Oh God, that was terrible. But I wanted to show you this here. If you want to keep this part, even though it would be annoying to someone with screen reader, it won't make it inaccessible. What you can do is go here, highlight this part, and make it the same color as your background. And basically what you've done is you've made it, you've hidden that part where it says no difficulty, but a screen reader will still read it. So that's, you can repeat that all the way across. If you really, really feel like you need to keep these merged cells here, generally, the accessibility checker used to ask you to unmerge cells, but I guess it doesn't anymore. It just reminds you about them here. And it wants you to unmerge them. But here you can see this one actually says no difficulty, paren, male, close paren. And you can do that all the way across. And that's a sneaky way to get around that limitation with the double headers. Now, another way that you can get around that limitation is to normalize your information. And I'm sure a lot of you are accustomed, if you're like I was when I was still working, I got a lot of my data from databases. And that meant that this data didn't come to me like this. It came to me and it looked more like this. It was year, gender, difficulty level, age, and percent. What this means, you can take this, and if you've formatted it in a big T, one of the things you can do is you're going to summarize it with a pivot table. So that's what I've done here. This is summarized with a pivot table. And the reason you could get by with basically double headers on a pivot table is because a pivot table is accessible. Someone with a screen reader can actually go through a pivot table and read it. So a pivot table will allow you to have those double headers where a regular format, you know, a regular big T table or visually formatted won't. And then just a quick word about pivot charts. I believe these filters within the pivot charts are accessible. Once someone gets inside the chart using a screen reader, they can use these drop-down filters. And then we already talked about the slicers. So that's just a quick overview of making Excel accessible. Now I'll take questions.
Glenna?
Yep.
Hi, we have 6 questions so far. The first one is from Esdras, and the question is, What are the common accessibility challenges people encounter when working with Excel files?
I just went through what I just went through in the demo. Mostly it's going to be tables. It's going to be tables and charts. Use good alt text on your charts, but that's 99% of your problem is visually formatted tables, what the Excel MVPs call little t tables. I suppose you could maybe get by with doing a named range on it, but you really want to turn your visually formatted tables, your little t tables, into big T tables, and select header and first column and add alt text to your charts.
Great, thank you. The next one, I think you already answered before. The question was, how can an Excel user ensure that their spreadsheets are compatible with some screen readers?
I did. Yeah, that was exactly what I went over in the demo.
The next one is, when talking about accessibility, what are the common mistakes or issues that people might overlook?
Color contrast is a big one that people overlook a lot. They'll get the alt text. They will get screen reading order. And here's one that's really, really overlooked is one of the mistakes that people make is accessibility is only focusing on screen readers. Because accessibility really is about making stuff accessible to everyone as much as you possibly can. So you want to use things like simple language, to make it easy to understand by your intended audience. So especially with English, the simpler language you can use, the easier an AI translator can translate it into something that makes sense to somebody else in another language. Other things are, of course, the color contrast. Not only that, but things like not making clean and simple charts, or not necessarily simple, but make your charts don't need to be, the hottest thing, like a super spiral, cool looking chart. If it obscures the data, then it's not much of a chart, because the whole purpose of a chart is to make it easy for somebody to understand and absorb the data that you're showing them. It's supposed to be easier to do than looking at the numbers. So things like that are generally what people overlook a lot.
Thank you. The next three questions are, one of them, are there third-party tools or plugins that can users use in Excel to improve its accessibility?
Not that I know of. I am so sorry.
That's
You know,
okay.
the best I can give you is copy and paste it into PowerPoint and then run PowerPoint's accessibility checker, because it's better. If you have some element that you want checked. Excel does pretty good. Interestingly, it flagged that pivot table, but it didn't flag the table. So I'm not sure what was up with that, but I can tell you PowerPoint would have got it. So if you have any individual element that you're really wanting to check, paste it in PowerPoint and run PowerPoint's accessibility checker. Let it have a whack at it.
Okay, great. The next two is there a way to export alt text from all objects?
No.
Okay.
I wish. That'd be great. I wish I could export captions from Teams.
Yeah, this is an issue that
No,
also.
let's say not yet. We can always ask Microsoft.
Exactly. It's one opportunity.
Yeah.
And last question.
I'm just wondering, why would someone want to export the alt text, though?
Is a good question. If the person that asks is here, please, you can complement your question. And the next one and last one so far is there is a chart issue I found. Excel allows two charts with the same name on the same sheet. Do you know how we can use accessibility to distinguish between them?
Yeah, you can, in your chart, I think, let me take a quick look. No, I don't see it, but you know what? Here's what you can do. In the selection pane, if you double click on any item, I'm going to share my screen here really quick. Again.
Okay, please.
Okay, this is the selection pane, and I've got two charts here. Mine are called chart 1 and chart 2, but you can, okay, if I go here and literally, let me do a quick copy of this chart name, and I double click on this here, I actually can change, you can change the name of any object in Excel in the selection pane.
Oh, great.
So you can rename those charts as opposed to being chart 1, chart 2. And I think, can you rename them on the formula bar? Nope. And I couldn't find it on the chart design either, maybe on the format. Yeah, there it is. Maybe chart name? Nope. No, as far as I know, oh, there it is. You can rename it here as well. On the chart format. It is right next to the formula row. There is a name box. You can rename it here. But I think the selection pane is a much easier place to rename it. It's where you want to rename your tables as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So far, we don't have any more questions.
Yay, I can give a little time back to folks.
So please, everyone that is watching this video, give your feedback on bit.ly/avg 2023 feedback. You can put your comments and also make any questions to Glenna. We are pleasure to answer you later. Glenna, thank you so much. Have a lovely night.
It was my pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye.